Hello and welcome to my studio. In this video I'm going to show you how I made this image. Photographing a dark subject on a black background can produce a striking result. The technique I show in this video uses rim lighting to isolate the subject from the background. And this can be used for virtually any subject. The faint glow visible in the finished image is added later in post-production. So let's have a little look at what I've got set up so far. At the back here I have a Profoto D2 studio flash, and on the front of that I have this 4-foot octabox. This is going to produce our rim light. Now the subject for today is this aubergine. Now in order to make a black background, what I've actually done is cut an aubergine shape from this piece of card. And this has been cut so it's just a bit bigger than the actual aubergine itself. Okay, so then moving a bit further forward, I have a 24 to 70mm zoom lens on the front of the camera at the 70mm end, and on the top of the camera I have this flash sync trigger. This will also allow me to control the flashes. The camera itself is tethered into Capture One software. Okay, so the first thing to do, just to make sure that we don't get any contamination from the house lights, would be just to take an image with no flash, which is what I'll do now. And there we go at the settings that I've got, which is 1/250th of a second for the shutter speed. That's the flash sync speed for that camera. And an aperture of f8 at 100 ISO. We have no image at all, which is exactly what I want. Okay, so with that experiment out of the way, the next thing to do is to sort out the subject and the background. Okay, so what I've got here is a C-stand, and on the end of the C-stand I have some wire which I've bent into a hook. That will hold the aubergine, and at the back of that I have this articulated arm which will hold the background. So I'm just going to mount the aubergine onto the wire like that. There we go. Okay, so at this stage we could do a bit of a test just to get the flash going and to give us an image to start with. And there we are. We can see that we've got our aubergine in the middle here, and this is the softbox. The whole thing looks a little overexposed to me. However, at this stage that probably doesn't make any difference at all. Now this is the silhouette that I cut out earlier out of just a piece of black card. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to clip that behind the aubergine. Now this will take a little time to get it exactly in place, because it does need to be lined up quite precisely. The gap between the aubergine and the background is very small. It's almost touching. Okay, so we'll just have a little look through the viewfinder and see if that's lined up. It's probably not bad. We'll give that a test. There we are. And what you can see in this image is this is the cardboard silhouette, and the white line that you can see around the outside of the aubergine is where the light from the softbox has wrapped around the subject. Now the amount of wraparound that you get is dependent on lots of different things. It's dependent upon the position of this card relative to the subject. It's also dependent upon the size of this card relative to the subject. and it's also dependent upon the distance from the front face of the diffusing material. So if I, for instance, move this closer in to about here, and we take another image, you should see that the wraparound changes markedly. So you can see that there's an awful lot more wraparound in this image than we had in the previous one. And all I've done is move the softbox. But there's another thing to notice about this wraparound that we've got here. If I just zoom in, you can see that it's actually got quite a hard edge to it. Now this is a function of actually using a softbox as the background. So if I wanted a nice graduated edge, what I need to do is make a graduation across the background, across the diffusion material. Now you can't do that with a softbox, so I'm just going to remove the softbox from the flash and put a diffusion material in place. So there we go, we've got rid of the softbox off the front of the flash, and I have this diffusion material which I can just unroll, and this will now form my new background. There we go. And you should be able to see that there is very little gap between the silhouette, which is now going to form our background, and the diffusion material and the subject. They're all very close together. That will give us the maximum wraparound that we can get from this setup. Now the flash at the back here, I'm just going to point at the center of the diffusion material and we'll give that a bit of a test. Now you should be able to see that the quality of this highlight is very different from what we had before. This was with the softbox, and this is with the diffusion material. If I just zoom out to a full image, there we go, and you can see that that is becoming quite pleasing. It's still probably a little overexposed, but we'll come to do the exposure in a while. Okay, so to help assess just how the graduation is working across the background there, what I'm going to do is actually zoom the lens out. So I'm about 28mm, which will give a wider image. So you'll be able to see the way the graduation works. There you are, you can see the light is falling off to each side. Now if I wanted to make that more pronounced, what I could do is add a reflector to the light at the back, which is what I'm going to do now. And we'll just pop that on there. That, and we'll take another image. There you are, and you should be able to see from that that the graduation is a bit more pronounced. It's also quite a lot brighter because it's concentrated the light. So I'll just take that down a stop, just so that we can assess it a bit better. There we go. Just do that again. There we are. That's starting to work quite nicely. Okay, so there's a couple of things that just need addressing. One is this could do to be a little longer, so I'll just roll that down a little. And the other thing is that you can see in the image that the contrast is becoming a bit degraded due to all of this light entering the lens of the camera. Let me just zoom that back in again. We'll take another image, and this should make it a little clearer. Yes, you can see here that the blacks aren't staying black. That is due to all of the light from around here entering the lens and generally degrading the image. So what I'm going to do is make a mask which will go in front of the lens here to mask out the majority of the diffusion material. So what I've got here is some bits of card which I've just clamped to the top of this stand, and I've put them in such a way as they form a mask so that it doesn't obscure the subject, but it does take out quite a lot of the background. Let me just take an image and you should be able to see the difference. There you go. So you can see the effect of the mask, which is just here. This is what we had before, and this is what we've got now. And what that mask does is increases the contrast in this part of the image, which is what we want. Okay, so with that complete, what we need to do now is just think about how the subject itself will be lit. So for that, what I'm going to do is add a softbox about here somewhere. Here we are then. So this is another Profoto D2 Studio Flash, and that's going into this 2 foot by 2 foot softbox on the front of it. And I've positioned it so that it's very close to the diffusion material at the back there, and as close as I can get to the subject without interfering with anything. Okay, so that should help it wrap around the side. What we'll do is just take an arbitrary test image just to set the exposure. Yes, so I think that is probably a bit bright. It probably needs to come down by 2 stops. There, that's much better. So the next thing I'm going to do is just adjust the light at the very back. I'm just going to take it down by about a stop, which will again modify the rim lighting itself. There we are, that's quite a lot better, I think. If I just zoom in and we just look down the side here, this is what we had before. So this is on the energy level that we had previously, and this is what we've got now. So it's a bit more refined. Okay, so with that now captured, it just remains to go into Photoshop and do the post-production. So this is the captured image opened up in Photoshop. So the first thing that I'm going to do is just make a copy of this layer just by right-clicking on the layer there, click on Duplicate Layer, and just click on OK. So this is the layer that I'm going to edit, so I can leave the other one alone. So the first thing that I want to do is just assess how black these blacks actually are. So in the info panel, which is just at the top here, you can actually just pick it up and move it. So if I just move it around here, for instance, if I just put the cursor on this area, you can see from the numbers there, these little numbers in here, that isn't actually black. It's just a very dark grey. Now, in order to make that black, what I'm going to do is just add an adjustment. So I'll go up to Image, come to Adjustments, come to Levels. Now this will allow me to change the black point. So what I'm going to do is click on this little eyedropper which sets the black point. And I'm going to make this very dark grey my new black point. So I'll just pick an area somewhere up here. Just click on there. And now you can see that it's actually changed that to black. I'll just go around and just check the image. That looks okay. Yeah. This maybe needs a little adjustment down the bottom here. Just pop that on there. Yeah, that's good. Okay. I'll just pop that panel back. There we are. And just click on OK. Right, so that has given me a true black in this area. So I just need to get rid of this white which is coming through. So what I'm going to do is literally paint onto this image with black. So I'll just make sure that I've got black and white selected and the foreground colour is set to black. I'll go and find myself a paintbrush. It's possibly a little small. Let's make that a bit bigger. I'll make it a bit harder too. There we are. Now I'm going to zoom in so I can just address this bit just on the top of the stalk here. Make my brush a bit smaller. And I'll just make it harder. There we are. We'll just get rid of the rod which is holding up the aubergine. There. So that's gone. Zoom out a little bit. Go back to a paintbrush. Make that a bit bigger. There we go. And I'll just paint that through. Being careful not to go over the edges. So with the black edges of the card silhouette background painted out, that is now on a solid black background, and we could leave it at that point. But I do like the idea of adding a small glow in the background. So in order to do that, the first thing I'm going to do is make a mask of the actual subject. And I'm going to use the magic wand tool for that. So I'm just going to click on the magic wand. Sample size is set to 5 by 5. It doesn't really matter. But what does matter in this case is the tolerance. If I have the tolerance set too low, so if I set it for 2, for instance, and then I try and make a mask, you'll see that it will get various bits wrong, as you can see from the marching ants here. Now I know that this is a contiguous black background, so I can actually make this tolerance quite high. So if I put it to 30, and I do the same again, so just get rid of that and we'll just do another one. There, that's giving me quite a nice result, but again it's getting it wrong in a few places. So we need to be somewhere in between. So I'm just going to set that to 20. There. I think that's a reasonable compromise. So in order to turn this selection into a mask, what I'm going to do is just click on the Add Layer Mask button down here. And that will make this selection into a mask. So the next thing I want to do is just add a new layer, and then I'll drag that mask onto that new layer. Now if I want to check what this mask actually looks like, I can just double click on it. And that will bring up the mask itself. I now just zoom in to the top. There we are. And I want to take away with a paintbrush. I'll make that a bit bigger. There we are. Being quite careful, I'll just rebuild that part of the mask that it got wrong. There's an ever so slightly small bit there which just needs rebuilding as well. There we are. Okay. So with those bits done, just click on OK. And that's our mask all cleaned up. Okay, so that is on what is an empty layer. If I take the background away, there is nothing in this layer. So what do I actually want to do? I want to add a glow in the background. So if I click on that empty layer, and I go to Gradient Tool, And just in this box at the top here, you have the basics. So we want the foreground to background basic, which is that one. We just make sure that's set. And obviously the other gradients you can have are just a linear one or a polar one. And I want this polar one. Okay, so if this was the foreground and background colours, just plain black and white, and I just pull that out from the centre, what it will do is produce a gradient which goes from black to white, which isn't really what I want because it's a bit too much. So I'm going to change the background colour from white to something more appropriate. And I can start by actually sampling the aubergine itself. Aubergines aren't actually black, they're very dark purple. So we can just move that around until we get to somewhere up here, like that. Just click on OK. And now I'll do that same operation again. So just drawing out from the centre, there we go. And we have this nice purple gradient now in the background. And I think that looks okay. That's the sort of thing I want. So with that done, I'll just use the crop tool. Now I've got 16:9 set, but you can use whichever ratio suits your subject. And what I'm going to do is rotate the image. So I'm just going to rotate it so that it's at a nicer angle for that crop. Something like that. I might actually make that a bit bigger as well. Now if you want to actually make it enlarge from the centre, hold down the Alt key whilst you pull the handles and it will come out from the centre, like so. There we are. Yeah, and I think that's pretty good. So I'll just click on OK. And all we need to do now is just fill in these areas on the side. So again, just make sure I've got black and white set, and black is the foreground colour. Go to a paintbrush. Select the background copy layer. And just paint those bits in. And there we have it. That is my take of a aubergine on a black background with a bit of a glow just for good measure. Now the technique of growing a very small amount of background to make a bigger one can be applied to all sorts of different subjects. And as you saw in the first part of this video, you have an awful lot of control over the way the rim light appears. Okay, well, I hope you enjoyed watching how I came up with that image. And if you like watching these sort of things, do click on the other images as they appear, and don't forget to subscribe. Thank you very much for watching.